record.
Yeah.
We are going to start right here and take it away, Tom. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming again. We had a very successful walk this morning with Dr. Rycenga and my friend Nicole Thomas. We had a great turnout. So I'm just going to take a minute for some of the people who may not have been on that thing to talk a little bit about one of the reasons why we're doing it here in New London. Dr. Rycenga has written this book about the Crandall School, and there are just numerous connections between New London and Canterbury and the Crandall School. So let me just do a little bit. And that's why the title comes from here. It starts with the Harris family. You're going to hear more about all of these things. William and Sally Prentice Harris were the parents of what is known as the Harris sisters. There were four of them, and there are also sons. William, and again, this is an indication of how far this spreads. William Harris came here from Haiti, okay, and Mrs. Harris is of Penobscot Native American heritage. This is a slide of the family, and they're not all on the screen, unfortunately. Charles is off the screen at the top. The ones in red are some of the ones that we're going to be talking about today. This is the other side, another side of the family, Scipio Anderson. He was also enslaved here in New London. His son is William Anderson. He was married to Celinda Harris. They were longtime New London residents. They owned a house on Shapley Street from 1843 until 1937. Okay. This is the Crandall School that we will be talking about. And these are two of the main characters, Prudence Crandall, who founded the school. And the first black student at the Crandall School was Sarah Harris Fairweather. And we discovered that Sarah Harris Fairweather lived in New London between 1841 and 1855, right up on Broad Street, where we started the tour this morning. Her husband was a blacksmith, and they were involved in the abolition movement because in the 1830s and the 1840s, New London was anti-abolition. It was pro-slavery. This is an example of a public meeting to show their support for their Southern brethren against these abolitionist fanatics. Okay. You may have heard, school started partly because of that controversy. Ichabod Pease started a school for black children because there was a controversy about educating black children with white children. The parents objected to it. He started a school. No, we never heard about this. We discovered it in a little historical sketch with a basic, simple reference to it. He was 81 years old when he started doing it, and this is one of the connections. He didn't do it by himself. He did it with a young lady named Miranda Glasgow. Miranda Glasgow went to the Crandall School. Okay, that's where she got her education. Celinda Harris Anderson was a sister of Sarah, and she was married to William. They lived on Shapley Street. This is where they lived. Oh, I'm touching something here. That's why it's. This is where they lived. This is a map, one of my favorite maps, the 1876 map of New London. Their house was on the corner of Shapley and Huntington Street. It's no longer there. There's a senior high-rise on that site right now. We have recently installed a plaque for the Black Heritage Trail nearby. You'll see there's another little building on that property. That little building was a stable that was converted to a lecture hall and a school that we never knew about. And the school was called Good Samaritan Hall. And the school was operated by Olive Harris Olney, who is another Harris sister who was living here. She ran a school for black children in New London. Okay. She was married to Frederick Olney. Okay. Frederick Olney really recently came into New London, into our consciousness because a Whaler Merrimack journal was donated to the Custom House. And they didn't know by a black woman named Edwina Owens Badger up on Martha's Vineyard. And she didn't know why it was in her family, but she thought they decided to send it here to New London. And upon examination, it turned out that it wasn't signed. Nobody knew who wrote it. Turned out that the author of that Whaler journal was Frederick Olney. Frederick Olney is married to Olive Harris Olney, okay, the woman who ran the school up there. So it's like uncanny. And it turns out that Frederick Olney, 10 years before, had been the hero of an arson attack on the Crandall School 10 years before. Okay, so it's all connected. Okay. And of course, he's connected as a black mariner. That's another whole story of New London. And here is an example that connects the black mariners to the Crandall School, to the abolition movement. It's just amazing. One of the people that came and lectured at that Good Samaritan Hall was Henry Highland Garnet. There were the two most prominent black abolitionists, formerly enslaved orators and speakers in America, the antebellum America, were Frederick Douglass, that everybody's familiar with, and Henry Highland Garnet. And Henry Highland Garnet was the more radical of the two. Okay, he came and spoke at New London. Okay, nobody knew this account of it. Okay, he spoke at the end at Good Samaritan Hall on the Andersons' property. And what Jennifer will go into much more than I will, New London was an example of intersectionality in this movement. The abolitionist movement in New London was made up of men, women, black, and white, all working together. Those are some of the names that you see. You see the ones in blue are the ones that we're talking about connected to the Harris family. What did they do? They published 2 anti-slavery newspapers in New London. Okay. They also brought Frederick Douglass here to New London. Okay. In 1848, he gave 4 speeches down at behind the New London Day, or the former New London Day offices at a place called Darts Hall. He gave those speeches in May of 1848. 3 weeks later, Connecticut abolished slavery. Okay. The last New England state to abolish slavery. Was there a connection? I don't know. Could be. This is another Harris sister. She didn't actually come to New London. She was married. She was another teacher. They're all teachers and educators. She was married to a teacher named Pelham Williams. In 1863, they took their families south to New Orleans. This is in the middle of the Civil War, okay, to teach the freedmen, to educate the newly freed, formerly enslaved people. This is in 1863 during the Civil War. Talk about courage and talk about danger. Their school was attacked, okay, several times. They went on to become professors at what was called Straight University originally. It's now called Dillard University, and it's an HBCU. Okay, they were 2 of the early professors there. There are schools. Again, this is the impact of this stuff. There are schools in Louisiana named for their descendants. One is their son Arthur Williams, his wife Sylvanie Williams. There's also a school down there named for George Fairweather IV. Okay, he was a principal and a teacher in New Orleans. And he was the president at the opening of Southern University in New Orleans. Okay, he was an interim president. Okay, he's the son of George and Sarah Harris Fairweather from Broad Street. Okay, their husbands were involved in this. Pelham Williams is married to Mary. Okay, he was the vice president of the Connecticut Colored Men's Convention, 1849, which was held in New Haven. Okay. The two of the delegates from New London were George Fairweather. He's married to Sarah. Okay. William Anderson, he's married to Celinda. And of course, Pelham is married to Mary. I always like to say, behind every successful man, there's a Harris sister in this case. Okay. All right. This is just a constellation, just a quick. New London was transformed from the greatest slaveholding section in New England in 1774. According to Lorenzo Johnson, okay? By 1848, Frederick Douglass refers to it as probably the best part of the state in terms of the abolition movement. Who is at the center of that? The people you're going to hear about today. But there they are right in the middle. There's the Harris sisters and their parents. And if you look at the constellation of people that they were involved with, on the left is the New London abolitionist group. Okay, you see Henry Highland Garnet, William Lloyd Garrison, Ichabod Pease, and Miranda. I'm not even going to get into that. Isaac Glasgow. That's another whole story. That was her father. Okay, another eminent person. In the upper right, we have some of the national abolitionists that were connected to Sarah Harris Fairweather in the movement here in New London. Of course, Prudence Crandall. Some of the people that were involved in this were involved with the Amistad. There's the Whaler Merrimack. There's Frederick Douglass. and Calvin and Hezekiah Goddard, two guys. Calvin was he was the 17-year mayor of Norwich. He was a mill owner. He was also a congressman. And when William Harris first came to Norwich, he bought property from Calvin Goddard in Norwich. That's the guy he bought the property from. Hezekiah Goddard was a merchant and a businessman in Norwich and New London. And what did I do here?
Terribly wrong.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Click anywhere on your presentation. Just click on, yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
That's 82 Parker.
Okay. All right. He was Hezekiah Goddard was a merchant when George and Sarah Harris Fairweather bought a house on Broad Street. He's the guy that gave him a mortgage. That's Calvin's brother. Okay, so they're all connected. Sarah and George Fairweather were next door neighbors to Henry P. Haven. Okay, Henry P. Haven was a whaler agent here in New London. We are sitting in the room that his money donated. He's the guy whose money built the library. Okay, he was living in that house at the time with his half sister, Frances Manwaring Calkins. Okay, Frances Manwaring Calkins wrote the history of New London. These people are backyard neighbors to the Fairweathers. Okay, it's just amazing how they're all connected. Last thing, we mentioned all the Harris sisters. What we don't mention is the Harris brothers. Okay, and this is something that not many people know. Okay, Charles Harris, he was involved in the Crandall School. It was him and his wife that were probably responsible for Sarah getting in there connected at some point. He was also there at the time there was an arson fire there. He became a restaurateur in Norwich. Okay, this is his genealogy. Okay, you can see him in red over there. Well, he had a son named Jerry Beeman Harris. He married Gertrude Fielding. Gertrude Fielding is a direct descendant of Uncas, the sachem of the Mohegans. Okay, and if you look on the left-hand side of that screen, their grandson Julian Lamont Harris became chief PG of the Mohegans. He became a Mohegan sachem. Okay, in the 1930s. Okay, on the other side of that, we follow down. You see Roland J. Harris. New London people might recognize his name, and another person at the bottom there. Okay, here they are right here. Roland Harris was instrumental in getting the whole Mohegan casino started way back in the 90s. He was one of the moving forces. His daughter, okay, is currently the vice chairwoman of the Mohegan Tribal Council. Okay, she's an attorney, and doesn't she have an interesting name? Sarah Harris. Okay. She's currently the Mohegan Tribal Council vice chair. Okay, I just want to show you this. You see that white star down at the bottom there? Okay, that's where we are. See all those red arrows? That's the history that we've been talking about today. We're sitting right in the middle of it. Okay, all of that stuff happened all around us. All right, the white stars were the library. Okay, and this is one of the things that I always like to let people know. You know, the past isn't dead. It's not even past. This is still live. When you have people like Sarah Harris with the name of Sarah Harris Fairweather, it's still alive. Okay. That's the end of my thing. Now I want to just take a moment to introduce the star of today's program, now that you have an association with New London. Jennifer Rycenga is the author of Schooling the Nation. This is the book right here. The Success of the Canterbury Female Academy. She is a professor emerita in the humanities department at San Jose State University, recently retired. Her scholarly work has focused on the abolitionist movement, exploring areas previously hidden or marginalized, such as Black women's activities and voices, the anti-racist work of the white abolitionists, and networks of families and friends involved in the struggles against slavery and injustice. In addition to her work on the Canterbury School controversy, she has led 2 digital humanities projects on the Burley family of Plainfield, Connecticut, 7 siblings who all supported Prudence Crandall and the Cranberry School in the philosophical analyses of the work of Black speaker Mariah Stewart. The Burleys, if you notice that constellation I had, the Burleys were listed there underneath Charles Burley was one of them. Okay. Rycenga's other work ranges widely across feminist musicology, co-editor with Sheila Whiteley of Queering the Popular Pitch, Global Feminism, lesbian philosophy with Linda Barafaldi. And her next major work will examine the convergence of justice, history, music, and the natural world. In our current national crisis, she is taken to Substack, where she writes essays that thread history into the news to suggest ways we can collectively move towards a better future. She lives in Rochester, New York, with her wife Peggy Macrae, two cats and a dog. So I want to welcome. I also want to say that a lot of the stuff that I have talked about, we talked about on the walk today, I wouldn't have had if I hadn't been introduced to Jennifer Rycenga, because she has shared some stuff from her research that led to discoveries here in New London that we wouldn't have known about. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Jennifer Rycenga. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, it'll take me a minute to figure out how to.
I, I, I think that's it.
That's it. All right. Okay.
You know how to get it to full screen?
I'm going to try. I have an idea. What I wanted to do was get that Zoom thing out of the way, and I can't do that without stopping sharing. Let's see what this says. Optimize for video sharing. Let's see if that'll work. No, apparently not. Okay. So there's going to be stuff at the top that'll be cut off. I'll help. I'll do what I can. That really should be able to go away, but it isn't. Anyway, let me start by saying that I have been as benefited by learning about Tom as he claims to be for me. He actually has the honor of having found a unique item in the history of the Canterbury Academy, that being a letter that was written by one of the students at the time of the crisis that we can tag to a particular student. We have student writings, but they were all anonymous when they were published in newspapers, so that the bullies in Canterbury wouldn't have the names of the students, right? And so they would be protected. So the only letter that we have that comes from a student, and we know who it was Sarah Harris, which she wrote to her family here in New London. So Tom gets a special mention for that. And that also is why I now refer to him as my brother from another mother. Because he and I think alike about sleuthing through the archives. And also, I believe that he and I and Nicole and many of you here think that history is something that is alive and something from which we can take a great deal of power. I start my talks by saying that I am unabashedly going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm going to talk about the woke people, the woke people of our past. And if they come to arrest me for that, I will be guilty. And I will be. Okay. So, obviously we're meeting at a moment of crisis, and it's a crisis that revolves around education. I'm glad that Remesa Ozturk is no longer in custody. But in the editorial that she wrote that apparently made people so mad at her, all she asked for was critical thinking skills, that they're going to embrace efforts by students to evaluate diverse and sometimes contradictory ideas and opinions. And as I will show, I believe that kind of learning happened in the Canterbury Academy. I think it is very important to create, as a teacher, to be creating nimble minds, not creating carbon copies of oneself, but creating people who can think in new and changing situations. But what we're seeing is that education is consistently targeted by authoritarians. And that was certainly the case for the big controversy in Canterbury. So if we can think about education when it is mutual rather than strictly hierarchic, when we are all learning from and about each other, and we're creating knowledge keepers, people who will nurture this knowledge, and memory bearers, those who hold the memory and move it forward. And I've talked to many of you today and see how you're all doing that in the areas that stoke your passions. And then that critical thinking skills are kryptonite for dictators, right? And so we can find those in books. I love being in a library. I firmly believe heaven is a library. And here we are. And the powers that be in Canterbury reacted very badly to the idea of educating African Americans And later that would be replayed on a much larger scale in the South after the Civil War, where a lot of defeated, bitter whites did not want to see education coming to the newly freed people. So we're going to come back to all of that. But just to say that this is the history we need now, because there's so many elements of the story that are familiar with things that are happening in contemporary society. Students attacked by bullies. I mean, the whole question of bullying in schools and on the internet is a major one. Students were threatened with involuntary deportation. The real scandal around the Crandall School is that most whites who thought they were well-intentioned believed that all free Black people should be sent back to Africa, regardless of whether they had been there or not. And the question of whether it should be voluntary or not was always slippery. They always talked about it being voluntary, but it's clear that their plans were for it to become involuntary or to make it uncomfortable for African Americans to stay here. We have young women of color seeking an education, principled persistence to achieve justice, growing your coalitions. I see that happening in a lot of the movement right now, convincing more and more people to take action. And I think some of what Tom was talking about here in New London, as New London switches from being a pro-slavery to an abolitionist town, is about convincing more people to take action. And so again, this is diversity, equity, and inclusion as they really are, not some caricature. We see women sparking women and doing that sparking across lines of race. And then the women spark the men to action. And then we've got the women and men, Black and white, striving together. And they're doing it without any reasonable hope of electoral success. This is about the ballot box, per se. Yeah. And they're doing it without vast resources of money and influence. So we need to know and share the story now because it has some real parallels. And what I tried to do in the book is to show that, yes, the school was only open for 17 months. People have written it off as a failure. It's not about what happened only in those 17 months. It's all of those echoes later. And this is where Nicole and Tom have been invaluable to me in finding so many of the traces here in New London. And it makes sense they would be here for reasons of geography and economy. So Canterbury then is a pivotal story. It happens starting in the fall of 1832, when we'll see in a moment when Sarah Harris first asked to be admitted. Then it reopens as a school for Black women only in April of 1833 and runs through September of 1834. It's pivotal for the history of education, for the history of free Blacks, for abolition of slavery, for women's history, because all of those dates that are up here are before Mount Holyoke had opened. There were no colleges for women. So an advanced academy like this was the highest form of education open to women. I like to say it was probably like an advanced placement course in high school or the first few years of a junior college, right? About that level of education. And that was what was open to women. And the idea of education being part of the struggle for liberation, as well as the struggle for inclusion in full humanity for both women and people of color here. But got to give a little bit of background. 1831 is the year that we really begin the abolition struggle as we know it. It was the struggle now for immediate abolition as opposed to gradual abolition. Many ideas of gradual abolition had been put forward. The idea that, well, gradually we'll give people their freedom and that way we can compensate the owners. And by the mid-1820s, plenty of people had seen through that and said, no, they're committing a crime. They don't deserve compensation, the owners, and we should just, well, go in the direction of freedom immediately. So 1831 is the year that happens. 1832, we see it make its little migration to Canterbury. And in 1833, we have that full-blown coalition where we have new forces and new passions arising from within society and listening to each other. So 1831, January 1st, William Lloyd Garrison up in Boston launches The Liberator. The Liberator is going to be the paper of record for the abolitionist movement for the next roughly 35 years. He said he would publish until slavery was no more in America, and he stayed true to his word. His last issue was at the end of 1865. And his first editorial is brilliant. I certainly recommend you all go look it up and read it. I've been quoting it a lot lately about the apathy of the people is enough to make the statues jump from their pedestals. Anyway, so it's absolutely brilliant. But I think his biggest move came on January 8th because that was his second issue. David Walker was a black man in Boston who was a used clothing merchant who was helping to outfit black sailors who were going out into their profession. And David Walker had written what he called an appeal to the colored citizens of the world. And in it, he said that slaves had every right to revolt against their masters and use whatever means necessary. He said if George Washington was justified against the British, slaves have many more reasons to be justified. It's an amazing document. He also, in that document, contests Thomas Jefferson's. He said the same man who wrote "All men are created equal" also compared us to orangutans. So he knew this isn't some woke thing I just invented last month. Anyone who was awake and reading it could see it, right? So David Walker wrote this appeal, and then unfortunately he died in a communicable disease outbreak in Boston in 1830. But Garrison recognized how important Walker's appeal was. Garrison was a pacifist. He didn't agree with what Walker was saying, but he knew it was important. And that to me is an act of anti-racism. You don't have to agree with everything everybody says. You have to recognize each other as intellectual equals. And that means being willing to agree to disagree sometimes. And so Garrison published the appeal in the pages of his newspaper, and that gained him a lot of respect from the black community, as you can imagine. But it also showed that he really meant to allow for a range of opinions on how to end slavery. Then there was a white woman, Lydia Maria Child, who was the Martha Stewart of her day. She wrote household helping books, and and she also wrote the poem "Over the Fields and Through the Woods to Grandmother's House We Go." Not her best effort, but that's how you might know her. And she had already written a novel called Hobomok about a marriage between a white woman and a Native American man. So she already was doing some thinking on issues of race, but she heard William Lloyd Garrison speak, and she said, it was as if the Holy Spirit descended upon me and I knew what I had to do. So she, at that point, became a full-time abolitionist. She also wrote an appeal in 1833 in which she talks about the Canterbury School, among other things. She did some research for that in the Boston Athenaeum, which then promptly closed its doors to women for the remainder of the century. It's like we let one woman in here, and look what she did. She found the truth. Close the door. Anyway, she's a remarkable. There's a great biography of her where she's referred to as the first woman of the Republic, and I think that's justified. And then in August of that year, Nat Turner in Virginia, in the southeastern corner of Virginia, he was an enslaved black man who led a very well-planned uprising against slavery that had a chance of success militarily. His goal was to conduct a campaign of terror for 3 days that would create something of an army of slaves from various plantations, and then to take an arms depot in the city at that time that was named Jerusalem. And those of you who know the Bible, 3 days, Jerusalem, you can kind of see where this is going. The problem was, though, that a white militia force defeated his forces, by the way, by a subterfuge. And so Turner was defeated. However, he was not captured. And so for the next 2 months, he was on the lam, and the white South was terrified. And again, he was someone who was fairly well educated. We don't know how exactly he got that. He claimed that God sent him the knowledge of the letters in the rows of corn. And if he had told who had taught him, whether that person was white or black, male or female, they would have been imprisoned and probably executed too. So whether it was God in the corn rows or an actual person, he protected them. In the middle of that time, when Nat Turner is on the lam, a black woman walked into Garrison's office, Mariah Stewart, and she said to Garrison, "Would you publish my writings?" And they looked like they were just religious writings on the surface, but they were religious writings with an added political kick, um, in which she says, we do not have to put up with this. We can also rise up, and we have minds too, which will not be buried under only pots and kettles. She called for there to be a high school that would be constructed. And it's very possible, in fact, likely, that Prudence Crandall had read Mariah Stewart's writings. And I'll turn to that in a moment. But the amazing thing here is that Garrison, having already made the leap as an anti-racist, now is able to do something that's pro-feminist. He's able to hear the voice of a black woman and understand this is a voice we need too. And so he publishes her work and stands by her even when she starts to get flack from within her own community. And in that way that synchronicity works, there was a young African-American woman about age 17 or 18, never been able to figure out who her parents were or who she knew, but she was living in Boston as Mariah Stewart was starting her speaking career. Mariah Stewart, by the way, is the first American-born woman to give a public political speech to a mixed audience of black and white. So Mariah Davis would have heard Mariah Stewart speak, and yet Mariah Davis had somehow met Charles Harris, and they had become betrothed. And so, the 19th century, the era of long betrothal. So Mariah Davis decides she'll move closer to where her future husband lives in Canterbury, Connecticut. She needs a job. There's this school teacher who is just starting a school, and she goes and sees, could I get a job here as the household servant? And she does. And I gave you a tiny piece there from David Walker's appeal. For colored people to acquire learning in this country makes tyrants quake and tremble on their sandy foundation. Why? What is the matter? Why, they know that their infernal deeds of cruelty will be made known to the world. So just keep that in mind. David Walker can speak to our era too. But before I pick up with Mariah Stewart again, 1831 also saw a terrible failure to establish what would have been the first historically black college or university. New Haven was chosen as the site by a group of black and white abolitionist men, including Simeon Jocelyn, who later becomes famous with the Amistad case. And Simeon Jocelyn is one of my favorite of the white activists in the abolition history because I share a trait with him, which is undue optimism. Just think that really people will get the point and be nice, and no. But again, I know my weakness, and I share that with him. So he thought New Haven was perfect, that it would, the climate is good, and a lot of black men were in the seafaring industry, and there was a major seafaring industry in New Haven, and thought this will be perfect. And no, that's not what happened. Instead, there was going to be a public vote on this, and that vote coincided with the defeat of Turner's rebellion that was blamed on Turner being educated. And so it was one of the editorials I quote the most often about this said, "Of what use can it be to a coachman to know Horace or mathematics?" So it was simply about, we will put limits on what black minds can think about. Yeah. And so the school was put up to a vote. It lost the vote, 700-4, one of the more lopsided votes. And in many ways, this was the high water mark for what we call the colonization scheme, which gave us, by the way, Liberia and Sierra Leone among contemporary nations. This was their biggest success, and they were very proud of it. And when Canterbury happened, they thought they could pull out the same playbook and make it work again. And what they hadn't counted on was that Canterbury would be different, because now it was women involved. They hadn't figured on that. But those of you who are interested in what happened, this is now part of the Yale Beinecke Library has made this school their project. And Tobias Cropper, in particular, with Charles Warner Jr. of the Freedom Trail and Michael Moran of the Beinecke, put together about a 20-minute video called What Could Have Been. And for those of you who know New Haven, and I went to Yale, so I know it very well, it's just fascinating to see where they had planned the school and how it would have happened. To me, the failure of this manual labor college sets up what happens in Canterbury. The difference is that this one never met. There are no students from this one. There's no alums. We don't know what we know about the ripple effect that we can see here in New London from the Crandall School. So that's the tragedy of it. So yeah, Mariah Davis moves to Canterbury. And I've included some maps here that show how the riverways work. So Canterbury, of course, right above Norwich. Canterbury is on the Quinnebog, and Norwich is where the Setauket and the Quinnebog and the Yantic all come together. And so this is that relationship there. And then you could see how it goes directly there because that's where you get the Thames starting, or excuse me, the Thames. I forget where I am. I often used to say to my students, Detroit is the first violence that Americans did to the French language. And I think that maybe Thames is the first violence that Americans have done to the British language. So Windham County in northeastern Connecticut has the nickname of the Quiet Corner. Connecticut was generally called the land of steady habits. And so there was a kind of inbred conservatism in a lot of the area. Canterbury, the city to the north of it, Brooklyn, and the city to the, I should say village really, to the east of it, Plainfield, were the centers of activity during the Academy controversy. Norwich had a large free black population at that time, so they were also involved. So Mariah Davis moves here, and that's when the magic happens. Again, I just want to set the scene that Mariah Davis would have been in that building that's there in the upper left-hand corner. That is the African Meeting House, which to me is the beating heart of American justice. And all of the NEH grants were canceled for it on April 9th. But anyway, that's where Mariah Stewart spoke. We know David Walker had spoken there. We know Garrison spoke there, and the New England Anti-Slavery Society had its first meeting there. So it's to me it's really the place where Dr. King refers to the Declaration of Independence as a promissory note. This is where the promissory note starts to get repaid. So what happens? Mariah Davis is working in the school. She's 18 years old, 1832. That time the academy was for white women. No one ever said that out loud. It was simply presumed that it was for white women. And Davis was working there, and she was intrigued by Prudence Crandall's obvious sincerity and ability to listen to things that Mariah Davis, said. And so Mariah Davis took a remarkable chance. She had access to copies of that radical newspaper, The Liberator, and she brought it in to the school. This was a big risk. Remember, 18-year-old first job. What if the woman didn't like this newspaper? Because at that time it was certainly considered to be a fringy kind of publication. But it worked this time. It pricked the conscience of Prudence Crandall, who had been raised a Quaker, but had recently converted to the Baptists in one of those very enthusiastic Second Great Awakening conversions in which the goal was to perfect the world. That's still my goal every day, but it gets harder and harder. But anyway, she was very activated by her faith to to do something, to change the world. And so that combination of the Quaker deep anti-slavery values with this activist Baptist faith was perfect for Prudence Crandall. She read this and she's like, I started to see how even the free black people are mistreated, as well as the horrors of slavery. So she was seeing both sides of it. And you have to, in those days when slavery still existed, obviously slavery was the greatest evil that had to be crushed. But to understand that racism undergirded both what was happening in slavery and then what was happening to free black people. That was the key move. And so Crandall gets that. Mariah Davis notices that Crandall was receptive and also notices that Crandall says to her, if you want to sit in on classes when your work is done, please do. So she started a kind of very mild integration right there. And Tom had mentioned that later on, Mariah Davis's husband, Charles Harris, becomes a restaurateur. And so probably those basic skills of arithmetic and literacy were very important. They were ones that Mariah Davis needed later on. But Mariah Davis was already on a good basis with her future sister-in-law, Sarah Harris. Sarah was a little bit older, and she wanted to get a little bit more education because she thought maybe she would become a teacher herself. And so Sarah Harris, emboldened by what Mariah was telling her, went to Crandall and asked permission to attend the academy. She said, I want to get a little bit more learning so that I could teach others of my race. And Crandall goes back and forth a little bit because she says, Sarah asked me many times, that persistence. And finally, Crandall did what I suppose a Baptist in 1832 would do. She did a practice called talismanic biblical reading, which is when you open the Bible to a random point and try and figure out what God is telling you. Yeah. And I thought I didn't put that slide back in. Anyway, she opened up to Ecclesiastes, which I think was not a fortunate choice in many ways. Ecclesiastes is the most depressing book in the Bible. It's the one that tells us there's nothing new under the sun, which isn't a good thing for a potential revolutionary to be reading. It tells us that whatever that things just come around and everything's the same. It led to that bird song, turn, 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 right? So it's not perfect. But she opened up to the passage that read in it's 4:1 that said, the oppressed had no one to stand with them. The rich and the powerful did, but the oppressed had no one. She said, okay, that's pretty clear. And she went and admitted Sarah Harris as a result. So these are three women. This is one of the few instances in human history where I can point to, we've got three women who interact to create this new thing. And it's the people who are potential students who have to approach and educate the teacher. Mariah Davis is educating Prudence Crandall by bringing her the Liberator, right? It's like, if I give you this and you learn what my situation is, maybe you'll help me with some of the knowledge you have so that we can get out of this situation. And I do think that the best students are the ones who come to their teacher for a reason, right? Who they know you have something that I need and you will learn from me. I learn from my students all the time. So off they go. These women sparked each other. And once you've got the flame of human reason lit, it's going to spark more changes. Transformative change. And again, I think that's why the authoritarians want to suppress it. They don't want transformative change. So these women cast a stone into a pool of complacency that resulted in more ripples than scholars have yet documented. And in fact, since I published the book, which came out on January 7th, we've made new discoveries about some of the students. It's just amazing. So Schooling the Nation, the book, presents a microscopic look at a movement for social change near its inception. Because, racism was always there. And as soon as the white parents found out that there was a Black woman in the school with their children, they did not want that. It interrupted their status. And really, the mothers were like, we sent our daughters to get an honorary degree, not to be part of a social experiment. We wanted them to get an MRS degree, not a degree in activism. So it's clear that Crandall has a problem. She's gotten this very large house right on the green in Canterbury. And so she decides that she has a different idea. And she writes to William Lloyd Garrison and she says, sir, I don't know you except through the medium of the press, but I think you might help me. I would like to have a school for Black women only? Do you think there are enough Black families in the Northeast that we could make a go of this? He says, come to Boston. Garrison's biographer says this was the first political tryst either of them had ever been to. And they met at a temperance hotel. It's just too cute. Um, so she goes to Garrison and he says, yes, I trust you. You seem to know what you're about. And he gives her his list of contacts, starting in Providence, Rhode Island, which was a town that Crandall knew because that's where she had attended school at what's now the Moses Brown Academy. So she knew it pretty well. But she didn't know the Black people of Providence very well. And now she meets them. The first person she meets is an African American mother named Elizabeth Hammond, who was a recent widow. She kept a boarding house, and she had two daughters of an age that she would send them to the school. She was so taken by Crandall, she went and introduced Crandall to many other Black families who had daughters in the right age group. So Crandall somehow had taught herself the anti-racist lessons that made her trustworthy within the Black community. Then, even more daringly, Crandall went off to New York City. Crandall is an unmarried 30-year-old white woman at this point. She meets with all of the leading Black ministers of New York City, who were the head of the abolition movement there. And they all trusted her enough because remember, they're the ones who are going to recommend that their parishioners' daughters go to this distant place, Canterbury, that they haven't heard of. And the largest group of students comes from New York. So she apparently was pretty convincing. And by the way, I included a little piece there on New London. When she traveled to New York City, she almost certainly came through New London. But I'd have to do a lot of work on ferry schedules and things like that to be sure. And the result was that in March of 1833, the new school was ready to go. This ad for her school starts that Prudence Crandall returns her most sincere thanks to those who have patronized her school and would give information that on the first Monday of April, the school will be open for the reception of young ladies and little misses of color. Those may sound like patronizing terms now, but they were not then. They were terms of respect that were reserved for white women. And to back that up, we have 15 men who signed this endorsement, 8 Black, 7 white. But you only know that because I'm a scholar telling you. You can't determine it from how the list is put together. The list is ordered by where they live. And every Black man on this list has a title, either Mr. or Reverend. Again, titles that were not generally granted to African Americans at the time. So the ad itself backs up what she had said here as well, that she was using these terms as terms of respect. And I would point out here that it's often the case that well-intentioned people from the majority culture will say that they want to find those who are worthy of this education. Crandall just said, send your daughters. I know they're worthy already. They're already young ladies and little misses. I don't need them to show up and prove it to me first. It's the same way you shouldn't ask her white students to come and prove it to her first. So, this is the abolitionist interracial male network that had, a lot of these were names that were involved in the New Haven school. And now they're even enriched more. So quite, and again, what are they all coming together for? Black women's higher education. You know, it's startling. And so when that expanding ripple from a spark among women, Black women inspiring white women and white women reciprocating that, I list that as an example of a theory called philosophia, which is the wisdom between women. And this is, again, the purest example I know of it. Then it goes out to the parents, families, and students, and the men are coming back together as well, growing from New Haven and putting this together. Then I have a couple of other local things here. I mentioned Lydia Mariah Child wrote an appeal, and she says that New Haven and Canterbury are connected. She says that our places of public discussion, the demon of prejudice girds himself for the battle the moment Negro colleges and high schools are alluded to. Alas, while we carry on our lips that religion which teaches us to love our neighbors as ourselves, how little do we cherish its blessed influence within our hearts. how much republicanism we have to speak of and how little do we practice. So just calling out the truth of your falling short of your ideals, of your stated ideals. And we mentioned Calvin Goddard and Henry Strong of Norwich joined with William Ellsworth, who later became a governor of Connecticut, and he was the son of one of the former Chief Justices of the United States, Oliver Ellsworth, one of the first. William Ellsworth constructed a case for Black citizenship using the students at Crandall School. And let me just point this out. Citizenship cases are often won through the exploits of adult males, particularly if you fight in the military, that's often a good ticket into being accepted into citizenship. Unmarried Black women carrying the reed of citizenship, that's bold.
Mm-hmm.
But Ellsworth's arguments were so good that they reappear in the Dred Scott case because they have to be openly refuted by Roger Taney in his famous decision that the Black man has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. And then eventually used in Brown v. Board, which overturned segregation. So really a remarkable history. And the most recent previous full biography of Crandall by Donald Williams. Donald Williams is a lawyer and a legislator from this area, and he does a really good job getting into the legal weeds. So, and then the Burleigh family, which I'll talk more about, and then the formation of anti-slavery societies that were largely white dominated, but not exclusively. And people really were starting to recognize that, talking to each other and like, wow, it's really wrong what they're doing to these students. So these are some more of the Norwich names, including Mary Harris Williams. Will come back to her. David Ruggles, who you'll be hearing about later this month. Sarah Harris Fairweather. Arnold Buffum, an interesting guy who was one of the founders of the New England Anti-Slavery Society, who actually came to help Crandall in the beginning days of the school and was one of the endorsers. The free Black communities understood the multiple dimensions of Canterbury and what was going on there. And David Ruggles was a very important activist, raised in Norwich, and he knew the Harris family and others because he had lived with them as neighbors. In June of 1833, he attended a free Black convention that was held in Philadelphia, and he introduced a motion of very enthusiastic support for the Canterbury School and Prudence Crandall. Unfortunately, they didn't record the text of what he said. But it indicates that he, from his position of knowing this area, was endorsing the school. And he was someone who was influenced by Maria Stewart. He published her works later. He's kind of the reason we know her. And Lydia Maria Child, who I've mentioned too, he was influenced by both of them. So he respected women as intellectual actors. That's very strong stuff. So what was going on in that beautiful building up in Canterbury? Somehow those students, and it was between 25 and 30 Black women were there at different times, and their white abolitionist teachers were able to get some real learning done in the school. One of their keys was, as I mentioned before, they never gave away each other's names. There was never a break from that code. A lot of the student names we have are from trials where the opposition had no problem putting their name in, right? But they never broke their code. Again, as an historian, I kind of regret that no one kept a hidden roster somewhere. But we don't know for sure, but we know, and then the other source we know from is later letters and memoirs and things like that. There were 4 white teachers in that school. Prudence Crandall was joined by her younger sister, Elmira, and then 2 members of the Burleigh family were there, Mary Burleigh, the only sister, and William Henry Burleigh, who I'll come back to later. We know that the school was a success in terms of education because at least 10 of the students became abolitionist activists, and at least 6, and probably many more, became teachers themselves. So that's very strong. Again, if you're looking for whether a school is a success or a failure, I think looking at what the alums do is a good measure, especially one that had to be closed because of violence. In a room filled with so many eminent researchers as yourselves, I'd like to leave this slide up for a moment. This is the full list of the students as we know it now. And the ones who have an asterisk next to them, we know they're active in the abolitionist movement, and the ones with the little dagger cross are the ones for whom we have extensive evidence of what they did after the school. But you'll see some of the names don't have either of those things, so we just don't know. A few names haven't even been traced yet in terms of finding out who the actual student was. I have good hunches on all of them, but let me just point out how hard it is to research teenage women, right? A lot of teenagers are using a nickname, which isn't going to show up in the census. And by the way, the 1830 and 1840 census don't help us because they only list the head of household by name. And they don't, then underneath that, they just list, females in a suitable age range and stuff. It's like, it's very hard. And then
Mhm.
a lot of these women are going to change their names very soon. So it's devilishly difficult. But we've had some success in finding some of these. And then every now and again, we get a little gift. Like the woman here at the bottom of column 2, Elizabeth Webb, no one had ever heard of her. She wasn't on any list or anybody's radar. And then a fine scholar in the field, Cabria Baumgartner, passed me some material. She goes, "Oh, I used this for my book. I'm not using it anymore. You can have this file." And I started reading it. I'm like, wait a minute. This Elizabeth Webb Iredell, because she was married by then. Crandall's referring to her as one of her students, and she knows her well. How did that happen? And she just had escaped us entirely. She's a major activist whose brother is one of the finest early Black novelists, and whose daughter becomes the first nursing graduate at Howard and leads the nursing school there, which of course becomes a major professional field for a lot of Black women, right? So another connection. And Dr. Baumgartner and I are writing an article about this right now. I will see her next week to do some more work on it. So we don't know, but it keeps coming together. Those of you who are amateur genealogists and historians or professionals, please help. And yeah, I have to give a shout out to one Tom Schuch here. Um, because they say he found this amazing work, the letter from Sarah Harris written in 1833, which she says that our struggle will be the means of arousing the nations to their duty with respect to the condition of our colored population and be the means of allaying the prejudice of Americans. Remember, I said I'm an optimist. I hear Sarah's youthful optimism there, but we can make it happen now. And Crandall says, I have put my hand to the plow and I will never, no, never look back. And I'm going to prove to you that she held to that. The citizens of Connecticut decided to pass a law against the school. This defies all manner of constitutional regulations, but you get away with a lot before the Supreme Court will judge something. I think you may be seeing that in modern life too. So the law made it illegal to harbor out-of-state Blacks for purposes of education. Other purposes were fine because they didn't want to get in the way of any Southern gentlemen who were bringing their slaves with them when they made a trip to Connecticut. So you're bringing them here for some other purpose, that's fine, but education is right out of the question. And the opposition in Canterbury, who I try not to name by name just because they got enough attention when they were alive, but it was Andrew T. Judson. He said, we will treat her like any horse thief for her actions. And so she was arrested and thrown into jail. And she spent one night in the jail in Brooklyn, which was the county seat, until some friends bailed her out the next day. Her friends had all agreed not to bail her out before the fact because they recognized this could be useful to the cause. And the moment before she got into the jail cell, her main advisor, the Unitarian minister, Samuel J. May, said, are you still okay with this? And she said, I'm just afraid they won't put me in jail. Yeah. So in she went, and she wrote a letter to the editor of the Liberator, who at that time was a fill-in for Garrison, who was traveling elsewhere. She wrote this letter and she said, will you please send your Liberator the term of 6 months to Lydia Congdon of Jewett City, Connecticut, she having paid to me for your agent, Mr. William Harris, the sum of $1. Do not fail to send her one next week. So Prudence Crandall is in prison, and she took the time to ensure that a recent Black woman subscriber with whom she had dealt directly will receive her copy of The Liberator. She reveals that she remains in touch with Sarah Harris's father, William Harris, She's performing movement work. Yeah. And then she's growing the alliance she helped to actualize. Rather than spend the night alone in prison, a friend of hers from across the street, Anna Benson, who was a very smart activist woman, came over to spend the night with her. And so that means that in this very brief episode, Crandall's interacting by name with a black man, a black woman, and a white woman shares her cell with her. She's envisioning and actualizing a different kind of America in that moment.
Uh,
All hear the saying of be the change you want to see. This is an example of it. I don't want people to feel that we're on some uncharted territory, when as we're moving forward. People have done it before and we can do it again if that's what you want to do. So with this black law being passed, in its brief life, in other words, over 11 months of its 17-month existence, the school was subject to court appearances. And this litigation, I mean, I am terrified of ever walking into a court of law as a defendant, let alone having to do it 4 times in a year. It's like, this is persistence beyond. So these are the 4 cases. The ones that are highlighted in with a black background and white, those are the ones where we have student testimony. Those are also the ones that were won by the side of the school. The students were such effective witnesses and speakers that when they were allowed to speak, we won every time. That's amazing. When they weren't, the results weren't as good. The black law compelled the students to damage their own education, to impugn the respectability of their parents and their communities, and to deny their own citizenship. That was written into the law. The cruelty was the point. It was purposely to make them do that. And they didn't break. That's astonishing. And people recognize that, how poised and savvy they were. The reporter for the Connecticut Post became sympathetic to the abolitionist cause after watching those women perform. And I would also point out here that teenagers are not usually the most disciplined of groups, especially not ones who can evade the occasional sigh or eye roll at the dumb things their elders are saying, and yet they held. So what were the students learning in that school? It was already an accepted practice in Black communities to read the abolitionist press. That was one of the ways that you built up your reading skills. And one example of that here is this book, which is titled Thoughts on African Colonization. It's a long book by William Lloyd Garrison. The first half of it is Garrison explaining all the reasons why colonization is a mixed up, wrong-headed, satanic doctrine. The second half is all of the Black people who said that before him. He went around and collected the meeting notes from every free Black meeting that had happened against colonization. And he published them all. Most of them have the list of participants. It's an absolutely amazing source of Black abolition history. Probably every single one of the students knew at least one of the men named in that book, which is very powerful. You're building up your reading skills, building up your critical thinking skills, and that's your uncle in there. That's your grandfather. That's your father. It's your brother, right? And so that's really quite remarkable. But they weren't just reading the abolitionist press. They were also reading the latest work in philosophy. The latest work in philosophy was a British philosopher now long forgotten called Jonathan Dymond, D-Y-M-O-N-D, although I think of him as a jewel. Jonathan Dymond was a Quaker. He wrote a moral philosophy in which he said, the goal is to emulate the behavior of Jesus. And so he became a strict pacifist. And he said, if it wasn't right for Jesus to raise a sword when his own person was being challenged, then it can't be right for us. He said that slavery had to go. He also said that women's education had been proven to be a healthy practice by the Quakers. So he was on point on all these issues, and he was a moral absolutist, which is why the abolitionists all loved him. Eastern Connecticut is where he made his first landfall in North America, where these books spread the fastest. There was a major Peace Society up in Windham County that was circulating pamphlets by Diamond. And when his full book came out, the Unionist newspaper, which was published in support of Crandall, published entire chapters from his book in their pages. So the students are reading the latest European philosophy. And obviously, the struggle of those courtrooms are part of their own schooling. They're learning about civics the hard way, right? Who's included and who isn't, um, and what it means to be educated. And they're doing all of this while there's daily insults and vigilante violence. So this is another piece of student writing. We don't know which student wrote it, although I have my suspicions. And she doesn't think very highly of you can see a little bit of the teenager in this one. The Canterburyans are savage. They will not sell Miss Crandall an article at their shops. My ride from Hartford to Brooklyn was very unpleasant, being made up of blackguards. Those are just nasty people who throw insults at you. I came on foot from here to Brooklyn, but the happiness I enjoy here pays me for all. The place is delightful. So there's a way in which I think of the school itself as a kind of sanctuary, right? The place is delightful. All that is wanting to complete the place is civilized men. Get there, yeah. Last evening, the news reached us that the new law had passed. That's the black law. The bell rang and a cannon was fired for half an hour. And that's got to be intimidating, and you know it's being, targeted at you. Where is justice? In the midst of all this, Miss Crandall is unmoved. When we walk out, horns are blowing and pistols fired. So they persist anyway. The vigilante violence only grew over time. Students were refused medical attention, and the arson fire was set. And the hero who helped to put it out, a black man named Frederick Olney, with his New London connection, he was the one arrested instead. He put the fire out, and then 3 days later they arrested him and said that he had started the fire when he was inside and the fire was started outside. Anyway, when the students testified, their testimony was so strong that it took only 15 minutes for the all-white jury to acquit him. They were embarrassed at how threadbare the case had been. That's pretty strong stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, in July of 1834, a black and white cat, the only known fatality, was butchered, and its fur was placed over the fence as a warning. Even though the Godfather hadn't happened yet, everyone knew how to read this warning, which is that black and white were not supposed to mix. And that cat was a cat I had was my late mother-in-law's cat, and it was not the brightest bulb in the feline shop, but it wandered into the office as I was writing this passage. So at least it had some instinctive understanding and wanted to make sure I did a good job for its ancestor. And so the students are trying to adhere to this nonviolence that they're reading. This is another longer student essay. We as a body, my dear schoolmates, are subject to many trials and struggles, and we all know to what they are attributable. It is the prejudice the whites have against us that causes us to labor under so many disadvantages. They are so prejudiced against us that they will not suffer us to come up and be sharers in any of their privileges. Oh, prejudice, prejudice, heaven grant thy reign may be short. My friends, although the white people may be so enraged against us as to try to break down every benevolent effort that is made in our behalf and put every obstacle they can in our way to prevent our progress, you are aware that ever since we have been under Miss Crandall's instruction, it has been her utmost care to persuade us not to indulge in angry feelings towards our enemies. With unceasing and untiring earnestness has she pled with us to forgive them. And now let us try to abide by her counsel and feel at peace with all men. There's a lot of tension in this, a lot of tension. I can feel that student, every now and again, I have a good friend who he has a poster that says, stress is the condition caused when you don't punch out someone who needs punching out. And I'm getting that feeling here that this student is hard. But the students knew they had to maintain that stance because they were outnumbered and they were obviously outarmed, and they're all women, and they're women who are teenagers. So there's an element of sexual danger here too, right? So they hold to it. But that thing I said earlier about critical thinking, it pays off in that that violence nonviolence debate, which is a central one in the abolitionist struggle, Henry Highland Garnet, who was mentioned earlier, he marries a Crandall student, Julia Williams. In 1843, Garnet gave a very famous speech in which he echoed David Walker. In fact, he republished Walker's appeal to go with his speech, in which he said, of course, the slaves have every right to revolt, and they should. And it wasn't Garnet just speaking out of an abstraction. His own family was self-liberated, and he had suffered a broken leg, which eventually had to be amputated when slave catchers tried to recapture him and his family. So he knew that he would use whatever means he needed to preserve his freedom. And after he gave that speech, which was at a conference in Buffalo, and the conference refused to, they took a vote, and it was defeated by one vote as being the official voice of the convention. And a white abolitionist woman wrote that obviously Garnet didn't know what he was doing in making such a statement, and that maybe some white man wrote it for him. Garnet was incensed. He said, I expect that from Southern slave owners. I don't expect it from another abolitionist. He said, and in fact, nobody saw this speech. Nobody heard this speech before I gave it except for my wife. So the only person who had any impact on helping to edit it would have been his wife. And she obviously wasn't saying, oh, you got to cleave to nonviolence. She also had been able to move and change her mind over the decade. When the school was finally destroyed, it was a nighttime attack. It followed very dangerous riots in July and August in 1834 that had happened in New York and Philadelphia, respectively, that had actually resulted in both sexual violence and in some deaths to Black people. And this one was at night, and nobody would say who had committed it. The white authorities in town said, we have nothing to do with helping you to find the perpetrators. And it was obviously just too dangerous because sexual violence was what was going to happen next. Some rocks crashed through a ground floor window in which some of the students were sleeping. They were hit by broken glass. So the school was closed rather precipitously in September of 1834. But that's not the end of the story, and most people end it there because that seems to be the big drama, right? But no, it goes on. Prudence Crandall is the state heroine of Connecticut. I, for one, am delighted by that because it means that this story can travel far and wide. It means that the federal government can't outlaw that. It means that the story is recognized for what it is. But she's not a hero all by herself. This is really about a gallery of superheroes. Superhero con. Because a single hero is on the slippery slope to being perceived as a white savior. And while there are people who've written about the incident as if she was a white savior, there is one person who wrote about the incident who never said that, and that's Prudence Crandall. Every time she was asked, how did this school start, she always credited Mariah Davis and Sarah Harris. Always. So I'm just following her lead, just being a good scholar. So Canterbury becomes a force multiplier of a whole lot of heroes, a whole lot of people who find themselves. That's why I say it's a movement. It's prismatic. So on my book, I have 3 women on the cover to represent that. Sarah Harris Fairweather, the first student, who also becomes an important activist and abolitionist here, as we've heard. And her sister on the other side, Mary Harris Williams, who ends up going south to teach with her husband. It's an amazing story, what happens to their progeny. The woman in the middle is Maricha Lyons, who is not a student. She is the niece of one of the students, and she becomes one of the first people to write about the academy, the Canterbury Academy, including capsule biographies of Sarah Harris and another one of the students, Elizabeth Brown Smith. And she also writes the best account we have of the horrible draft riots of 1863 in New York City that were directed against mainly the free African-American population there, and included one of the worst crimes against humanity, which was the destruction and death of many of the inhabitants of a Black orphanage. Her name is Maritcha Lyons. Maritcha, Maritcha. I love that picture of the way she looks into the camera. Got something to tell you. And she did. So here in New London, as Tom has already discussed, we have at least three, probably more, of the Harris sisters who spend some time here, Sarah, Olive, and Celinda. Henry Highland Garnett and Frederick Douglass stop here, and also two of the Burley brothers, William Burley, one of the teachers at the school, and his older brother, Charles Burley, who had started the newspaper in support of Crandall called The Unionist. Both of them become nationally famous as abolitionists, and they got their start in Canterbury. And I agree with what Tom Schuch said, which is that New London is sort of Canterbury Academy South in the 1840s. Like so much of the energy moved here and helped to change this place as it had changed Canterbury. But it gets better because in addition to Mary Harris Williams going to New Orleans and helping at Straight University and prep school, teaching there, and her progeny as well, her sister Celinda Harris goes to Delaware, and their niece, Mary Fairweather, the daughter of Sarah Harris, also goes to Delaware. Delaware had been a slave state even though it had stayed in the Union. So when it came time for full emancipation and the education of the freedmen, that included Delaware. And so we have that energy that was started in that place up in Canterbury percolating through now to what is the great project of the last half of the 19th century. And so I have this quote from W.E.B. Du Bois because it inspires me every time I read it. That the education of the freedmen, this was the gift of New England to the freed Negro, not alms, but a friend, not cash, but character. The crusade of the 60s, that finest thing in American history, and one of the few things untainted by sordid greed and cheap vainglory. The teachers in these institutions came not to keep the Negroes in their place, but to raise them out of the defilement of the places where slavery had wallowed them. They lived and ate together, studied and worked, hoped and hearkened in the dawning light. It was the contact of living souls. I think that can all be applied back to Canterbury, but when you start to think about it on the scale of what happened after the Civil War and all of those teachers, black and white, male and female, who rushed to the South to teach, and yeah, none of them are famous, right? I mean, try naming one, yeah, that we don't celebrate that. It is the greatest thing in American history, like W.E.B. Du Bois said. They're not doing it to become famous. They're not doing it to get money. And they sure as heck didn't get money, I would add. I think every teacher is used to that. But this is a remarkable quote. I just think it's stunningly beautiful. And I think it's also historically accurate. That same guy, William Burley, I was telling about, he contributed hymns to a book published right here in New London by William Bowles in 1842. These hymns were hymns and psalms and poems were all to provide anti-slavery and temperance material to churches so people could sing their favorite hymns, but now with better words. And so not always shall the lordling's heel be planted on the poor man's neck. Not always shall the bondman kneel submissive to the tyrant's beck. The soul shall yet assert its right, though long despoiled by brutal lust, and struggling upward in its might, dash the oppressor to the dust. Who plants his foot on human hearts, treads on the Vulcan's crumbling brink. The fires beneath flash up. He starts, too late. The struggling wretch must sink. Oh God, we may not rashly set a limit to thy saving grace. We pray thee spare the oppressor yet, that haply he may seek thy face. And turning from his hideous sin, his brother's plundered rights restore, lest vengeance shall its work begin when mercy's voice can plead no more. So, see the kind of poet William was. This was already this is something that Tom already went over, but now you know a bit more about Mariah Davis. Charles Harris, yeah, he's part of that wonderful Harris family, but Mariah Davis, who is to me the linchpin of everything that happens, it's her bravery bringing the Liberator in to have Crandall read it and recognizing that Crandall was getting it. And now look, her descendants are helping the Mohegans in their self-definition. Like, wow. And they're even getting named Sarah Harris. Right? It's amazing. But my favorite story of the legacies of Canterbury involves this gentleman, Fritz Pollard Jr. Yeah. How many big NFL fans do I have in here? Not many. Okay. So Fritz Pollard Sr. is in the NFL Hall of Fame. He was a football coach. He also played for Brown University back when Brown University allowed for an integrated team in the 1910s. They actually beat Yale in a major bowl game back in the teens. And then he went on to coach in the NFL because the NFL started out integrated, then segregated, then had to be integrated again. But Fritz Pollard Sr. is not the direct descendant of a Crandall alum. He married one. Their son, however, is Fritz Pollard Jr. Took after his father, good athlete, but as you can see, he looks kind of nimble in this picture. He was a track and field star. And his particular skill was the high hurdle. And he became a member of the 1936 U.S. Olympic team. Oh yeah. Okay. A couple sports fans in the room perked up at that. The 1936 Olympics is Hitler's Olympics. It's the Olympics in Berlin, where it's supposed to prove white supremacy, and instead Jesse Owens happens to, right? So does Fritz Pollard Jr., who got the bronze in the high hurdle. So a descendant of the school is there disproving Hitler. That makes me so happy. Yeah. That's bringing it around. And guess what? He follows a career in law and works for the State Department in their study abroad program to help get, well, more international voices and bring the American message of equality as possible. His son also becomes a lawyer who does civil rights work. Just amazing.
Uh,
That picture of him.
yeah.
And coming near the end here, but I want you to think about just how much this country owes to Black teenage women and very young women. This story is a part of it. But Phyllis Wheatley, the great poet, was in her late teens when her first poems were noticed. Ella Shepherd is one of the women who helped to found the Fisk Jubilee Singers, who really made it possible for Black music to be preserved for many a generation. All of the great names of the 1950s and 1960s in the integration struggle. There's a book about this, a girl on the steps, about the young women who helped to integrate all the schools. It's heartbreaking, but it's also really important. And of course, the 4 girls in Birmingham who were murdered by a terrorist action in their church, and they were not children, they were teenagers. They were 13, 14 years old. And then in our own time, Darnella Frazier was the woman who, when she couldn't stop the murder of George Floyd, knew to tape it. We wouldn't know. It would be, Colvin's word against hers. And there are other examples of this. And so really the idea that there's something very inspiring about this. It's like, wow, look at how all these young Black women have helped us. And then there's something that brings me to very deep shame about it, that we depend on the most oppressed people to show us basic human decency, But Crandall continued in her anti-racist trajectory till the end of her life. In 1886, she wrote to a Black activist in Washington, D.C., "It gives me great happiness to know that the colored people are forming literary societies and printing newspapers. Anything I hear from the colored friends that is elevating to their dear struggling hearts is always received with thankfulness." So she's not saying elevating to the level of the whites, elevating to their hearts, right? That's helping them in the struggle. And then the last letter she ever wrote in 1889, a month before her death, she says, "I am deeply interested in the progress of the colored people in every moral and intellectual growth. I take some paper all the time edited by colored men that I can learn what they are doing for themselves." She's 86. She's living in a small prairie town in Kansas. I put it to you right now, how many white women, 86 years old in Kansas, do you think are reading the Black press as a matter of principle right now? Right? And so this is an example. It's an example of, let's really understand each other in how we're all trying to be a part of this conversation, right? So to come back to education, a lifelong educator, my father was a professor too, so I was born into it. It's family industry. but for me, it's about excitement and plenitude. It rolls over, right? I mean, you're always learning something new. It's where the excitement of life is. And I think that what happened in that school for those 17 months was the exhilaration of a community that was engaged in transformation and doing the work they needed to do. Well, they realized they didn't have the luxury of longevity. I mean, of course you don't. They're blasting cannons. They shoot pistols every time you show your face. But they got the exhilaration of what it meant to be urgent about their education, and they got it. And the result was, as you can see through the Harrises, you can see through some of these other stories, is every single family I've been able to trace, the legacy of valuing education has continued. And that's remarkable to me. If
Uh,
we miss a generation or lapse somewhere, it keeps going. And I'm deliberately quoting here from the speech that I cannot watch because I cry every time. Dr. King's last speech. He didn't know it was going to be his last speech, or I don't think he knew, but maybe he did. When he said, longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. And I think that that's what happened there. They're like, we don't have much time to learn. Let's just pack it all in. Let's get it started. And they got the ball rolling. One of the students wrote about the closing of the school, and in it, she writes about William Burleigh, that teacher whose poem I read. She says, I have found among my fellow students simple manners and intelligent minds. And there, if anywhere, love was without dissimulation. My teacher was ever kind. With him, I saw religion not merely adopted as an empty form, but a living, all pervading principle of action. He lived like those who seek a better country. And why I'd be touched if someone wrote that about me one day, right? That's the idea that philosophy carries right through you and that you are trying to build a better world. It's beautiful.
yeah.
So thank you for your attention. Go out and make it a better world. And I put a whole lot of the pictures up here of some of these characters who helped supported the school or were students, Crandall herself. And I invite your questions, responses, comments, and I'm very happy to sell and sign books for you too if you want. There's even more. I could talk all day, but I must stop now. Thank you. Comments or questions? By the way, do go up to the museum if you get a chance. It's so close. Yes.
I just have a question. San Jose is a long ways away. Did you grow up on the East Coast?
Yes, I went, my family moved here when I was 6 to Connecticut, and so I was in Fairfield.
Okay.
So not this part of the state. I never heard of Crandall in my school. And I went to Yale, and then after that, I've been I moved to California in '84, and I'd been there until I retired 2 years ago. So here I am now.
Why did Randall go to Kansas?
Yeah.
Oh, because there's always a new adventure. She made a very unfortunate marriage near the end of the life of the school, and her husband was kind of a millstone around her neck for the next 40 years.
Oh.
She and her family moved to Illinois after a series of family tragedies in 1837, and her husband eventually found her there, which was unfortunate. So he continued being a millstone around her neck. When he died, she was kind of at loggerheads, didn't know what to do. Her brother had come out to join them. And so, like all 72-year-olds, they decided it would be best to go homestead in Kansas. I will say this, Crandall did feel that it was going to be a good state because she knew that they were that had been bleeding Kansas, that had eventually decided against slavery, and that they were welcoming African Americans who were escaping from hostilities in the South, the so-called exodusters. And she also knew that they were a strong temperance state and strong on women's rights. So she was hoping all that would happen, and it did. She actually had the opportunity to vote in her town before she died. They allowed women to vote on matters having to do with the school board. And her small town, Elk Falls, realized who she was and let her cast the first vote. So she's written about in the history of women's suffrage for her actions both in Illinois and in Kansas, as well as about the school. So she was very strong for women's rights. She also got into spiritualism and Kansas before 1900 was this hyper cool place. And then something happened, a curtain came down, and it hasn't been quite as interesting since. But Kansas was a place where every crazy idea could happen. And that's part of the reason why Frank Baum set The Wizard of Oz there.
Huh.
Anyway, there's a weird set of connections to Frank Baum, but yes.
Spoke a little bit about the names of all of the students, but that there are no class lists. And
Right.
you mentioned that been doing a bit of detective work to figure out who those students were.
Yes.
And I'm really impressed that you've come up with 35 of them. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what have been those main sources? Were they like diaries or
Well,
family letters or?
there's of the students, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 are documented in direct, either court documents or immediately after or before the school. And so those were fairly easy to find. And by the way, I did not find them all. I mean, there's a lot of scholars who have accidentally stumbled upon a name and then they call the museum and the museum calls me. It's usually how it happens. It's some very prominent names. Have Afua Cooper, who just took the position as the head of Afro-Canadian Studies at the University of Toronto. She found one of them, a very prominent student. And this will give you an example of the problem. There was a student on our list that was, let me get this right now. I'll back up to the student list. But again, the problems with finding people are made worse. Yeah, Mary Elizabeth Miles here, this name. There was a name on the list, Mary Elizabeth Wiles. And so I was doing my work. I'm a member of Ancestry.com, and using various internet, looking for Mary Elizabeth Wiles. And then we get a note from Dr. Cooper up in Canada. And she said, I don't know why you don't include Mary Elizabeth Miles in any of your lists, because we have it right here in the memoir that was spoken about of her by Alexander Crummell, who's a major orator and figure. It's like, oh my God, somebody reversed the letters, M and W, right? And so Mary Elizabeth Miles is not just another name on this list. Mary Elizabeth Miles marries Henry Bibb, who's someone who self-liberated from slavery. And she and her husband moved to Canada and started the first Black newspaper in Canada. They are national heroes in Canada. So she's a major figure, and again, very educated woman who spends much of her life getting more education and then sharing that with others. So a lot of it is there's a mix of serendipity, and Sarah's a good friend of mine. Serendipity and research because of digitization. What digitization has enabled us to do is move through a lot of these names quickly, but it isn't foolproof for the Miles Wiles reason. Or for the fact that sometimes the name will be split between two columns. And so you still have to go in and do the hard work at some point. And yeah, a lot of it is just plain old detective work. Elizabeth Brown Smith, who we have there, we knew Elizabeth Smith was a student because that woman, Maritcha Lyons, had written about her. We had no idea what her maiden name was, though, because Smith was clearly her married name. And finally, a very good researcher in Rhode Island, dug it up. And it turns out to be another great story because she wanted to join a women's club, but that women's club wanted to remain an all-white segregated club, and some abolitionists resigned because Elizabeth wouldn't be allowed in. So, yeah.
Collecting names and gathering names.
This has been a fun century. Let's put it that way. And there's no end in sight. Yeah, it's been most of the 20th century. So, or 21st century, I'm sorry, I date myself. Thank you so much for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to introduce, that's Sally
The
Bryan,
Canterbury
right there,
School
who is our New London
Museum
Municipal
Museum.
Historian.
You provided so much
Thanks.
wonderful information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm happy to take more questions, but I didn't want the official historian to sneak by me. $20 and I cash check.
She's
so great. She is.
That's you.
Oh, okay. And I can sign. All right. So I guess that's the end. And I was no. Thank you. All right. And your first name again.
Huh?
Your first name? So I can sign
Sally.
it? Which one? What was your name again? Sorry, the name, your first name.
My first
Yeah.
name, Sally.
Sally, right, okay.
Yes. I
Great
did
program.
well.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so glad you had so much to look at.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm a very firm believer in
Oh,
the,
listen.
the power of the visuals. I will take a check. I'll even take an IOU.
I have to owe Tom.
I guess I'm a broker here.
I will pay you back.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
Oh,
let me see what I got here.
Oh, here you go. Joan, you remember I helped put together that, the movie that the dance company made, for the Hempstead House.
Yes.
Remember,
Let
I
me get-
organized everything?
Get out here.
Yes, and that was you called me, and that's how I got involved.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, oh, yeah, we're gonna need a few more. That's a good thing. That's a happy moment.
Take an autograph.
Your first name?
Kristen, Krist.
All right, that's one.
Yes, that.
All right.
Oh, sweet me. Oh, they're from. Oh, nice.
Thank you so much for that talk and the shadows we were walking today.
Yeah, it was great fun. All right, and make sure you let me know what you come up with, and I hope I gave you some new stories.
Thank you.
There's more where that came from, many of them are in the book.
I'm excited.
All right.
Did you describe, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
And?
And with
No,
Joey, that version. Yeah. All right.
Well, you have a lot of fans too.
Okay.
You're there.
Your column's really good.
Got a good one this week.
Oh, good. Tomorrow? Oh, good.
Thank you.
20, yep, exactly 20.
Are you selling the books or are you?
I'm not telling you, no.
Okay.
He's loaning money.
Yeah.
No, we're-
Get the money lenders out of the temples.
Actually, yeah.
Are you?
They forgot. They forgot,
Yes.
they said they forgot.
Paying
their
mine
cash.
because I spent mine at lunch. I was gonna charge it, and I thought, well, no, I'll pay cash, and then I realized later, no, I don't have my check, so I can't pay cash.
I'll cover hers.
Joan,
The usual spell.
Joan is, Joan is
Yeah.
Joan is a high school classmate of mine, actually a grammar school classmate of mine.
Yeah.
And high school.
Well,
You're the one who got me involved in the region committee.
That's right.
Yeah.
He also serves on the union committee. Yep. Our high school-
And I'm gonna start volunteering at the Hempstead House or the Community
Oh,
Meal
are you?
Center, or, yeah, I feel like I can contribute. Maybe I'll get that map that you still don't have.
there you go.
Working on it, I'm still working on it.
Yeah, I could have had it done a couple
All of
years
your
ago.
smiles meant so much.
What, thank
All
you,
the smiles in the audience.
thank you, we enjoyed it so much.
And-
I tried to stay being.
Oh, it wasn't it?
Down the middle.
Oh, but it
He
means
said
that
something
in
up.
California.
He set something up to the museum, and the museum and I worked very closely together, and so they're like, take a look at the Crandall Museum in Canterbury. The house still exists, they didn't burn it down, so it's still there.
Actually,
Are you paying for everyone, or
No, it's paid for you and where did Kate go?
you left?
I think I signed it already.
Hello.
Hi. How you
big
doing?
fan, thank you.
Okay,
There you go.
and first name?
Lee.
Lee. I had enough of Lee.
This guy is one of the editors of New London Day.
Okay, all right, there you go.
We've done a few things together.
All right.
Podcast.
You're named after you that you play tennis for. That's it. I like that.
I
Yeah.
did play tennis for them
See?
years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They named the whole place for you.
The
It's great.
name of the institution is a little sketchy.
It is right now, yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I think they should rename it for you. I'm,
Right,
yeah.
yeah, it's Washington and Lee Howard.
right.
That's what they should.
They can change.
You need to redo that,
Right, yeah.
You should make that suggestion.
Maybe they would take that, probably. I'd probably have to kick in a few mil, but
Right.
Yeah.
We'll put in a big word.
Okay,
Um,
all right, maybe if you kick in a few mil too.
And while
Oh, yeah.
I have a website dedicated to the Unionist, the newspaper that Charles Curley edited. And you might want to check it out just because it's a good way of, I mean, he was having trouble
United.
adjusting to the,
That sounds like
to
terrific.
the publishing business, but, it's just an interesting chronicle of a newspaper. It too was short-lived.
Bye.
Yes,
Good
you're
to see you.
proceeding.
Oh, you too, Andrew. Sue and Charlie.
A Sue? Oh, okay. SUE
SUE.
and?
And
I
Charlie.
And that's a IE?
We forgot to mention that Dr. Rycenga is gonna be out in Niantic next week, right?
Oh, is that right?
We did forget that.
Yes.
Talking about the Burleys among, as well as Brentwood, yes.
And I'm gonna be there with
There
her.
you go. Thank you very much.
No, I'm not talking about Christmas. That's the week after that.
It's going to be at
the end of-
It's interesting how he doesn't need to sleep, isn't it?
No, I'm gonna talk about the,
RIAL.
Yeah, yeah.
They were there.
she's talking at the, Brookside Farm and Museum.
At night.
When they were doing some renovations of the building, they found
It's staying late.
the Christian Freeman abolitionist newspaper tucked in the wall.
It's light.
That abolitionist newspaper
Oh.
was produced by the Burleys, so that's the project she moved on.
Thank you.
So that got her interest.
Yeah, I like small
All right, Tom.
towns. It's very fun.
All right, thank you, see you, thank you.
Yeah, 20 even.
I saw.
Here, I gotta run. So good.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a change. Pack them in. Yeah, just one second.
Yes, please.
Last night it was.
Oh, you were there?
Leader Center, some of the Crandall letters.
Yes, I did, for sure.
I'm not opposed to that.
I'm Marion.
Shane Library.
Okay. Nice to meet
Yeah,
you too.
But, could you just say for the
Which part?
The Leader Center, the Leader Center is in.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
the same.
By the way,
We did a lot of tours.
the poem
Oh,
of
you're-
Burley is the item that I got at the Shane Library. Yeah.
I had done a lot of.
There aren't a whole lot of copies of that in the world.
Okay, maybe we will. Take care.
Basically, just make a proposal and you'd be into it. You're interested.
That's right.
There is a wonderful thing about Crandall at the Shane Library, which was a cautionary tale to me, as this book took longer than I wanted it to.
One of the many possibilities, but I think
Is there was a woman who started the research to write a very good book, and she found, and she died before she could do it.
That's the basis of their little collection.
Right, right, and so she just donated her notes and all the materials. I will have materials to donate to you guys at some point, and I've been in touch with the head. Yeah.
You're up right
Yep. But I have to sort through it, and I've been kind of busy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
You're very
So I
welcome.
saw your, I saw
I know, I've
your
listened
made
to
a
it.
presentation at the Unfreedom Conference up in
Yes.
Evans Hall.
Yeah. Mhm. That was wonderful.
End of
Really
June,
incredibly inspiring.
there's gonna
Yeah.
be.
Thank you so much. And
Okay,
today,
thank you.
Same thing. Thank you.
All right.
David Ruggles.
Yes.
They already declared.
Yeah, they're 27.95 online, so this is the.
I'll have to go for and check it out.
But you can access.
Right, yeah.
You'll be surprised.
It's excellent. Oh, I can't wait.
So I'm
Yeah,
putting
it's
together,
hard to read.
All right.
Jim Lim.
And also, I
Selectman.
a reminder on Don Williams.
He's a local writer. so-
Yeah, yeah. You know, his focus is not on the students. He, you know, like my book is diametrically different than his that way. But it's not opposed, you know, I mean, it's, they figure that hand in glove and it covers more of Crandall's life after the school and I was going to do that, but then my publisher said shorter. Mhm.
David Ruggles was born. Okay. Yeah, there's no records, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Grandfather.
And so, yeah, his book serves a
but
very
anyways,
useful function
so-
that way.
Yeah, I
From-
forgot something like
She'll
that.
Put it
He
together.
was with a law firm.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
On Monday.
All right, well, thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Over to New York. Okay.
He's
gonna.
Fine, how you doing?
Tuesday.
All right,
Put something in the paper about that.
thanks.
Because the Lorraine Library sent me like a calendar.
Okay.
I've already
I
like
just kind of highlighted some of
Or
what.
like going across
They were
the
You know,
street.
I'm gonna do Wednesday, I'm gonna do.
People don't use it that way as much anymore.
David Ruggles' biographer is gonna do a Zoom on Thursday.
That was last.
And then PARS, you know, the Public Art for Racial Justice
Right, right.
Education.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They did all those
Art
murals.
Yeah.
They're bringing in a woman artist that is going to, on Saturday,
Here we go.
Invite kids.
Sure, thank you so much.
Create a David Ruggles.
Wait a minute, have you already paid me? Okay,
Incredible.
So,
I'm confused.
it's a great thing.
It happened.
Great stuff coming together.
Thanks. Good to
I
see
don't, I just want
Very
your
much, Frank.
signature. I don't know
Yeah,
why I'm
right,
gonna
it's
share it
very
with
tough.
Okay.
All right.
you. It may end up.
It may be.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, there's snacks in the back. If anybody's still here, there's snacks in the back.
Don't worry, I'm gonna take a bunch. My nutritionist isn't here to watch me.
And my wife isn't here, so
Yeah, I'm
hold the
sure.
chip.
Yeah, but
Oh,
I'm
she-
here.
You're not gonna tell her, are you?
Of course not.
Joan?
May I ask you, since you didn't grow up aware of this, how you came up to become aware?
My mom and I are when she was had more mobility, we would visit a lot of museums and things like that. And we had a particularly disappointing trip to Plymouth when my mom was living in Hamden. Yeah, you've been there too, so you know.
No, I heard.
Right. So we were driving back and it's like we felt we hadn't gotten what we had taken the trip for. And I go, I've heard that there's this interesting little story up in Canterbury. It's a historical house. You'll like it too. Let's go check it out. And within 5 minutes of walking through the door, I knew that was going to
Okay.
be my life for a few decades.
Oh, I didn't know if you knew David Light from Yale.
I
or anything.
I have met him. We have been on this at the same
Sure.
conference
I
and
would've
things like that. But
Yeah.
it was actually when I first was doing the project, Brian Davis was still there, and I got to meet with him.
Okay.
And that was and also there were a few other excellent scholars there, including John Demos had a lunch with me. I mean, just wonderful people.
I'm sure you've had a great influence on your students. You're a really good lecturer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I do. I actually had one student come up to me once. And I hardly remembered him. He was from the first year of his full-time teaching, and he said, I still remember your teaching. I go, yeah. And he goes, and he recited a whole lecture.
Oh, wow.
He's not. At that time, he was high school principal. He said, I remember what you said. It is a particularly memorable one about how the Aztecs, when they captured Spanish warriors,
Wow.
would sacrifice the horses first because they presumed the horses were more valuable than the warriors.
He probably had a photographic memory.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe, but yeah, I was like, okay, you really did remember it, Michael.
I don't know where I got it. My son found it and gave it to me.
Yes.
It's very different.
Yeah.
You asked if
Thank you.
we knew anybody
Looking
who taught down
I'll get back in
south.
when you're.
I will.
Yeah,
Oh, no. it's
And-
not- no, wait a minute. I don't.
the names, yeah.
I'm trying to come up with it. The woman's name, I think, is
Oh.
Mather.
Divided?
Okay,
Oh,
Rachel Mather.
No,
Anyway,
my
that's,
son.
yeah, it kind of, he has good taste
Yes, he
sometimes.
does.
Beaufort,
Thank you.
South
Nice
Carolina.
meeting you.
Yeah.
And she
Oh,
actually,
yeah. Both were
Yeah.
big spot.
she actually had
You know what?
built a couple buildings
When I said that.
over
This wasn't-
to this hill.
You even know.
And she
yeah.
started
Which
school
one?
One woman
like
came borrowed,
18,
took a book and said,
1868
she'll pay you
or
back.
something
I know
like that.
Mhm.
Oh, you do?
Was the
She used to work
and-
here at the library.
Then
runs
later on,
the Hempstead
a woman
Reading
named
Group,
Oh,
Pearl,
okay.
which we've
Cat.
done for the last.
TAT.
It's on Zoom.
Yeah, but you said there's a.
TATEN.
Okay.
It's a reading group.
Okay.
We did it on Zoom.
When
We do it on
down
Zoom.
there,
Get out of the house. I
after,
don't wanna.
uh,
with Zoom.
Rachel had died. And she was the music teacher, down there
Mhm.
for a few years before going to Storer College
Okay, sure.
in Harpersburg.
Wow.
It's been
Mhm.
over for 2
Yeah,
years.
we got people.
But-
Really good spot too.
She,
They're not gonna.
I just thought,
No, it's just.
no, these were from Northern Baptist
Right.
We don't live on
and,
this.
and,
Wow.
Yeah, the Baptists were very strong in this movie, which is, I think, a real feather in the cap.
mm,
I have published 2 articles in the American Baptist Historical Society's journal. One on Prudence's husband, Calvin Villio, who was a Baptist minister, and so that his life is recorded somewhere. And the other one was on the Baptist minister who converted her to being a Baptist, who was up in Packersville, Levi Nealon.
oh, yes.
Yeah, you're right, that famous. And he died at like age 33 and he's still
Yeah.
that famous.
Mhm.
And
I'm one of the guys.
and then one of the
Yeah.
Burley brothers, Lucian Burley, he's the one who ends up continuing that memory of Levi Nealand and also of Crandall students being admitted to Packersville Baptist when they have been kicked out of the congregational church.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the Baptists are the winners in this one.
And I knew
Used to
that
be able to buy a
um,
book at the
the Packersville
house.
Yeah.
Baptist Church
Mansion?
had been
The what?
involved in
The
this.
Shaw Mansion?
Yeah, can you still buy
but,
it? Where
I've
did
been
you guys get it?
trying to and
Mine.
Sue
Actually, I bought. I picked one up at a,
actually
yard
edits
sale.
Yeah, I read
my
that.
work, but
We
I'm
copied rather
editing,
than
um,
read.
on the-
Right,
on-
getting the stories.
You read it,
Yeah.
read along with it.
yeah,
He
well,
reads it.
I'm
But I wanted the
editing the
book.
history
I wanted
that some of us.
We read the book. I have the
Um,
book.
Yeah,
We
I
speak.
know.
the,
We sit
state committee
Used to be
have-
on the
Yeah.
written
I
Joy
know.
Mansion.
for our,
Yeah. Yeah.
at, Camp Whiteman.
Years ago.
Um,
that.
They write stuff.
Okay.
I was asked to be
I know.
on
Or
the board
Stone.
there once and I
I'm
was.
on the board there.
Well, I was asked, but.
that I
It's
did,
interesting.
then, but I was-
yeah. So,
Well, and it's in the Revolutionary War makes more sense now too.
yeah. Mhm.
I can see it, because
Gonna close up?
Oh, no, you guys.
yeah, okay, good, because I haven't rated the food in the back yet.
Yeah,
I need two of these.
I can use the help, but don't take it off. All right.
What do
There
they do with
There
my
are
book?
two women.
Make sure
who
you get
put
my,
together
oh, I've got it.
those Flyers.
Yes.
Violet, so if you can make one to Violet, she's the executive director of New England Land.
She already got hers.
Who does?
Violet.
Violet has this book?
No, she the one that borrowed the money from you?
No, that's.
Oh, it's okay,
Okay.
because she walked out with the book. Okay.
oh, there is one here.
That's mine.
Okay, okay.
I'm just confusing
I thought
everyone.
you were looking for yours.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I'm looking, I'm wondering what my name is.
thank you both for a nice
Thank you.
day.
Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
coming. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's good. to see
All
you.
right, Kathy says hello, by the way.
Give her our love, tell her I'll see you Monday.
Okay, I will.
Yeah. What's going on? Is she okay? Kathy okay?
Yeah, she's okay. She's got
Yeah.
stuff going on now.
All right, and the other one?
It's Stephanie, but I think it's a funny spelling.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Stephane, I think. But let me just check.
The thing.
It's a Spanish name.
Okay.
Sure, otherwise I'll just say it. I don't know if I have it. I don't have an email from her directly, but Violet mentions her. Come on, come on.
Gee, it's only 4 o'clock. I've been up since before 8. That's for me is unusual. I've got the whole evening in front of me.
Yeah.
Now,
Think
where
that-
do you live now?
In Rochester, New York.
Oh,
So I
wow.
drive down.
So you're staying over here
Yeah,
tonight?
yeah. I toyed with the idea of, well, I'll be done by 5. I can start
Oh, no.
drive back.
Oh,
And
no,
And
no,
I'm too old now.
no, that's good that you didn't
Yeah.
decide.
I've done it once, because I've been down here. This may be the 7th or 8th trip down since January.
Wow.
And one time I did do it, and I made it back, and I was fine and all that. But I thought later, no, that wasn't the wisest thing to do.
Yeah.
So
Just make it Stephanie. And
okay,
You know what I was confused about? One of the ladies' names up here was, now you got Mariah here spelled right, but it
Yeah.
was Maria,
yes, that was a convention among Protestants.
Oh,
They whether
pronounced
they
it
did
Mariah?
they were pronounced it Mariah so that they wouldn't be confused with being Catholic because of veneration of Mary.
My God.
Yeah. What can I say?
she's an intern.
Okay.
She's the one who actually did some of the work.
Okay.
Actually did the tech stuff to do it.
All right. And I'll be down here next week, so and
Well,
hoping to
you've
go
sold
to
quite a few books, you only
They're all
have.
right.
I owe you
Oh.
20, 40, 60, 80.
Okay. I'll you sure? That's fine. Okay, I could
just give me a 20.
All right, I will do that.
Yeah,
I will
we're
do
good.
that.
Okay.
Okay.
Looks like you only have 10 left if you count these
Yeah,
three.
there's a whole nother box in the car.
Oh, well.
But this is good.
And the publishers has a couple too.
Yeah, the publisher has a few, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But no, it's good. It is good just to have it go down and,
can you put it in schools or something?
I can't. I looked the other day on WorldCat, which is all libraries of the world, and there's at least 250 copies already in libraries, so that's nice.
Wow.
That means they've been through the whole cataloging process and everything. So
That's
that's
great.
very good.
Yeah.
And
And
so
so-
we'll see. I mean, I haven't gotten any royalty checks yet, but I'm not expecting to make enough money to like buy a house or anything. But,
No, well,
I'm not doing this for the money.
Yeah.
So I have to make
Yeah,
back what I
It's
spent.
kind of a specialty audience
It is.
kind of thing.
But this is where all my audience is, in southeastern Connecticut,
Well,
with good reason.
well, maybe you should get a beach cottage up here.
Yeah, well, and my mom is 98 and a half and yeah,
Parties, and we can all come.
it'd be great. Actually, I am tempted to move here once I no longer have anything keeping me in Rochester. It would be tempting.
Well, had you moved here a few years ago before the exodus, before the real estate market, because boy, I can't believe the prices now. People came from New York and New Jersey because they thought our prices were bargain. But now that the market's going way up.
Yeah, well, and I don't own, so I would be a renter anyway.
Oh, that's good.
So-
But you might just, those condos that, my brain is right across the street.
Joe, we're all getting that way.
No, but I can't remember shit, excuse my language.
No, that's okay. We've heard the word.
Yeah, what's his name? The one who built the condos, right across the street from the Thai restaurant, the Howard Street.
Oh, Harbor Towers?
Yeah, Harbor Towers. They're still, the University of New Haven bought a bunch of those and they're really nice. Sally Ryan, the historian lives there. And
That's where she lives?
yeah, she got rid of that. You know, he took her house, her really nice house on Ocean, is it Ocean Ave?
I don't know.
Way down, she had a cool house. That's mine.
I know, I'm just looking for the.
And
Did you get a flyer, Jennifer?
I did.
so
Okay.
Go ahead and toss another one in because
Okay.
they're not very useful.
So, they're selling those condos, the University of New Haven, and you can get a much better deal now.
Interesting. Okay.
They're actually, they're right on Bank Street.
Yeah,
I mean, they're right in town.
yeah. And they're not down in the midst of everything. They're off on their own and you get a nice view. So, yeah. Although my big mouth, with prices, the way they've gone up, I don't know.
Well, I think I'm supposed to end the Zoom, but I didn't. Let me see here.
All right.
I'm gonna add some more waters and some snacks to that box, but that might make it too heavy because you don't have any help now, right?
Well.
You bought a lot of stuff.
I didn't. Curtis brought it and the library provided it.
Wow.
I'm-
She wants more water.
No, I got water. Oh,
No. Okay.
I need more because I drink a lot of water and I hate to buy it, you know?
what? Hmm?
Yeah, I'm not,
Potato chip.
I'm not supposed to tell on you. Can't you eat chips?
So,
I'm not gonna tell.
how many you want, Jennifer?
Of which thing now?
Do you want 4 waters?
Oh, yeah, 4 would be good. That'll get me much of the way home tomorrow.
Alrighty. You sure?
Yeah.
Like, put them in here?
Yeah, just put them in there. They're not gonna open.
Okay, actually, you'll have 5.
That's good. Oh, and let me go get the snacks now.
All right. You probably have to carry this.
Right. The snacks can go elsewhere. They can go.
Yeah, you're carrying that, not me.
Oh, no. Don't you?
No. You got a bad back. let me run.
Actually,
I feel like we can jump.
I'm gonna run my stuff out to my
Oh,
car.
no, there's cookies too.
Oh, take
Damn.
Take them
No.
Yes.
No, I would eat them.
Take them home.
No, they would be shared. Yeah, that's the problem. I have no stop button.
I know what you mean.
So I will take I'll take more than I should.
I'll be right back. My car is right outside. I'm gonna put this stuff in my car so I can make another trip.
The smart boots.
Cheetos.
And I love
I used to
Cheetos.
love Cheetos, but you know, they're super fattening.
I know.
Well, I used to eat it like bag.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're all set, man, right?
Yeah, we are, and we left plenty of things for you to also,
Oh, I appreciate it.
help regulate here, yeah. Yeah. it's-
Take some cookies home.
Yeah, the cookies really need to be taken home.
Don't twist mine off.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You're a man after my own heart, and those cookies.
You're taking the water, right, ma'am?
No, I don't think I can take all of them.
Maybe the library can save it from another event. I was, take some of those out.
They do talk for
Huh?
events. They do
I
use
don't know why, do you want some pretzels? I don't do.
I do the same thing till I eat like.
Yeah, I really want to eat these.
Yep.
I do the same thing, man.
All right.